So now we're live, or will be live. So we have a returning guest today, right, Megan?
Yeah, our first returning guest.
This will be like
Andrew
the.
Jamieson's back with us.
That's right. And we're gonna talk about specifically collaborations, and more specifically, a collaboration that you did with him, or is in process, or you guys are working
Yeah.
together. But the thing is that
Yes.
it's not any type of collaboration. You've known each other like for more or less half your life, right?
Getting
Since
close,
when?
probably. I mean, as we get older, we
Sounds about
was
right. I mean,
2006,
it
I guess
would
we
have been.
met. Yeah.
At,
So
at least from your
yeah,
undergraduate years, right? So I will guess like
2006. Yeah, I think exactly half my life,
96,
to be honest.
18 years ago. So we're
18
at,
years. And
both of
I'm
us are
36, almost
36.
37. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah,
there you go.
and that
I guess
fast.
that the first question I will have for you guys is like, well, let's set it straight. Megan is the composer, and Andrew will be the
Well,
performer.
for this particular project, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
For this project. Yeah,
But
absolutely.
Andrew's a person that wears many hats.
Um, yeah, I mean, we have both been. We both work as composers in different situations, and I've written music that Megan has also performed. But in this situation,
Yeah.
absolutely, Megan is the composer during this collaboration, and I'm the performer. And I think that those roles are for the most part pretty fixed.
But when you guys started studying together, you both studied
Mhm.
composition. How you
Yeah.
originally knew each
Yes.
other was like from composer to composer.
Yes.
So you
Yep.
kind of know
Yeah.
that.
We were basically the only two composers in the undergraduate program at Northwestern at the time that wanted to go out to new music concerts and actually be engaged in contemporary music. And so it was, yeah. So we like became very friends very quickly because we were both doing the same types of stuff and interested in the same kinds of things. Um, yeah.
So you guys met
Um,
at Northwestern University. Let me put that up. Sorry.
Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois. So it's like right outside Chicago.
Well, people that know about composition, I guess that their composition program is pretty renowned, right? Or used to be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I still think it is.
I
I think it is. I
think
think
it
it's
still is. I
different
think.
than it's changing always because they've had different faculty come through, but I think it still has a pretty good name.
That's pretty cool. So I guess that my first question to you guys is like, how's it like to work with someone that you've known for so many years, like pretty much since youth, and have kept in touch with each other, as I understand it, right? You've never got contact.
Yeah. It was not just like that we've known each other. I think we know each other as artists. Like pretty much know everything we've done. Each other has done as artists, and often talk to each other about pieces in progress, and kind of start to get to know the inner workings of each other's brains as artists. So I think for me the difference was that Andrew got my music so fast. And I think for me, it was I usually takes it's actually quite a struggle to get performers at the level I want them to be, and takes a lot to kind of teach them where I'm coming from, and it wasn't like that, and I was kind of amazed, and then Andrew was kind of like, well, it's not that impressive since I've known your work for so long. But yeah, it's been really great because we kind of started on the same um, the same platform, and I think composing it too. I think there was a lot more. I had a lot of very collaborative projects, but this was very like different because I knew Andrew so well as a musician and what kinds of things he would do or what he would contribute. So I think he was able to contribute to like the actual construction to the piece a little bit more. Like a lot of times, you know, if I had something that I didn't like about the piece, I'm like, oh, I wanted to be more like that, he would pretty much immediately know what I meant and be able to suggest something to make it more that way. But yeah, I think it's for me at least. I don't know about Andrew, but it's been a lot more seamless of a collaboration. It's just been, I guess, really easy.
I told Megan I would really hope that
In a great
I
way.
would understand. Really hope that I would understand what she was going for, since they feel like they're the same things that we've been talking about for 18 years, sort of in whether they were things that that Megan first told me that she was experimenting with, it was we were students, or things that we had sort of learned about together, and I at least like to believe that I really do understand exactly what she's going for better and for worse. I think, it's also, it's also easy for me to feel confident or certain or overconfident even about some of the my ability to sort of interpret and decipher exactly what's in the score and what's behind the score, what sort of broader musical ideas are there. And I would hope that I would interpret them correctly, but I know that I interpret them very confidently, as if I'm the expert on the composer's music.
So Andrew, what would you say that it's kind of a different aspect of performing this piece with in relationship to other pieces? Like, what are the similarities? Especially what are the differences? How is it contrasting that Megan so well, and that know her music and have known her journey as an artist and as a composer and all that stuff?
Yeah, part of it, as I said, is that I have this sense of familiarity with either what the material is or with what I think that it is. And in terms of what else is sort of different about this piece, it is not unusual for me to work with musicians that I know quite well, and it's not unusual for there to be a lot of just very close collaboration and a lot of sort of just mutual understanding and building off of the rapport that you built with somebody, that you can collaborate with somebody once and you can come back and go deeper into that collaboration, and you can go do another project and go even deeper into that collaboration. And that is not an unusual way for me to work. So I really thrive, I think, on that sort of relational based.
Me too.
Would you say that it's a smoother process in that regard, in comparison with composers that you wouldn't know firsthand, or like?
And I think it's most helpful when we're trying to break new ground. It's most helpful to know where the other person is coming from when there's some new kinds of ideas and sounds being discovered or being expressed. I think that the times when I'm successful at working with a musician, a composer that I have not worked for before, is when they're doing something that's very where the material is very familiar to me. So, if they have written a score that uses the same kinds of notations that I'm used to in my general work as a performer, which is usually often I'm used to pretty traditional conservative kinds of notation. And so somebody who notates in a pretty traditional and conservative way, I probably would be able to read their notes pretty well. And if they're coming from an aesthetic place that's familiar to me, I probably would have some ease in sort of interpreting what it is that they've written. I think that where it's helpful or necessary to really have an idea where the composer is coming from is when we're doing something completely new that's never been done before. And those are some of my favorite collaborations, are the ones where we're really sort of radically recreating something new. And I think that that's what's exciting about Megan's music for me. And so I think that's what's unique about this piece. Well, there are just so many things, let me put it that way, that are unique about this piece compared to my collaborations, whether, compared to collaborations with composers and musicians that I know, or collaborations with composers that I don't know, like compared to any of those pieces, like Megan's piece really is unique in particular ways, and in the particular vision that it contains and expresses. And so I think if I were to really talk about what was unique about this piece, there's something to the sort of the length of the how long we've been working together, but I really think there's almost more to just the unique kinds of concepts and approaches that are in Megan's music in general, but in this piece in particular, that I think makes it. I think that's that. So if we were to talk about what makes it most unique, I think we would start to have to talk into some of the start enter into some of the specificities of what this piece is and what Megan's music is and what it is about that music that resonates with me.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I also think like this piece in particular, like the challenge of, because this piece is for your synthesizer. I think the challenge of writing for that was a challenge for me. Like it took me more outside my comfort zone than I've been in a long time, and I think it did like push me to think about music in different kinds of ways, because I really, really understand acoustic sound very well and acoustic instruments, but I don't understand like your particular synthesizer to the degree I understand like standardized, acoustic sound, and I tend to like to find situations that really limit like what I can do and like push against the walls. That's like kind of my comfort zone as like a composer. That's what I really enjoy, finding these like limited situations and pushing against the walls. But I was already in a situation where there was like even just timbrally, there's like maximal timbres, there's endless timbres. Like you could keep discovering new timbres because you could keep changing patches and do different things with them. And that was hard for me to like try to like dive into the piece. So I think I started simpler. I started with physical gestures. Like I the sound was not where I started with the piece. It was like,
before you
gestures.
continue, can you name what you're talking about? A synthesizer, but it's a specific synthesizer, right?
It's
is the
Yamaha ModX is how people pronounce it, apparently. And
it's from 2018. The model from
very good. That actually was not something I looked into. So yeah, so you've done your research and put the year that it was.
Well, in my, I guess that they change something from year to year. Sometimes I don't know. I don't really know. So. But I
can tell you that I bought this one in 2019.
Okay.
So, and I knew that it was fairly new. I had a different Yamaha synthesizer that was a similar. It was supposed to have a similar function and have a similar role within their keyboard series. And I had that keyboard, the Yamaha. I think it was the Mo 6. for a number of years until it broke beyond repair, and I needed to replace it. They recommended that I replace it with the ModX, and I've been happy with it for the kinds of situations that I tend to use a keyboard in, which is a mix of sort of very conventional, like, pop gigs. Like I have an entire array of patches that are set up and ready to go that I program during a wedding gig that I find is useful during other similar kinds of gigs that I can use those same kinds of patches, and then also in more experimental, particularly free improvisation settings, and it's done what it is, what the things that I've been interested in it doing, that I also was also interested in about the ModX. It's been able to recreate most of those things and also let me go in a few new interesting directions as well. I actually have the keyboard ready to display, if people can see my screen, and they can see. So this is a 6-octave, or is it? There's 6. Is it 6? There's only 6 C's, so it's actually only 5 octaves, but they call it a 6-octave. 6-octave keyboard. There's always they have most of their keyboards have a 6-octave and an 8-octave version. The 8-octave being the full size, and the 6-octave being a little more portable, a little bit smaller, a little bit lighter. And so this is what it looks like. I don't know if you can see on the screen here. I have it programmed that I can switch between different patches easily, so that you can hear just different sounds that are built into the keyboard that I can instantly change from one another. I have sort of the different patches that I use for Megan's piece set up right now, but I'm actually going to go and use the show you a couple of ones that I use for the wedding gig as well, so you can hear the different things. So there's just like a string sound that I might use for a song, or a regular piano that I might use, or a couple of different electric pianos that I might use. So anyway, so that's what it looks like. I think we might decide to talk more about what this keyboard is, and we don't have to. But I think the last thing I'll say is that it's known for having a super knob, which is visually quite interesting to see. It draws a lot of immediate visual attention, I think, with the flashing light that can change colors as you sort of rotate it around. It makes about 1 or 2, or maybe just 1 appearance in Megan's piece, but that's kind of the particular. If there's one thing, and if there's a number one thing that this keyboard is known for, it would be this little super knob right there. So I thought I would mention that.
But I will say that it's very important to speak about the instrument, because I think that, well, besides Megan's personal style, personal approach to composition, I will say, and I don't know if you'd agree, that what determines the materials and the form are two main things, and it's the relationship to you, the personal relationship, and the instrument itself. Would you agree with that, Megan or and Andrew?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't even know how the form of this, because I think when I started writing the piece, so we also don't live in the same part of the country. So we were able to meet a few times in person when we happened to be in the same city at the same time, but a lot of it we did through Zoom, through emails, just so we weren't, so a lot of it, like I think at the beginning I really didn't know the instrument very well at all. And I just was trying to come up with material that I was interested in the way it felt on the keyboard and the finding gestures that were kind of physically indeterminate, meaning that they weren't very consistently played, even just on a piano or any kind of keyboard instrument. And then we met together and kind of tried to put in the instrument, and he gave me tried a bunch of things, and then I wrote some more materials, and I still didn't have all the patches together, and then and then you made a demo of like a lot of, you kind of knew the sound world I was looking at, and then had maybe like 24 different patches you made a video about, and I had to kind of try to piece it through and match. But a lot of it, I feel like I just had like chunks of material and then had to kind of piece them together and then develop them. I think because I was really unsure with the sound of the piece, the form was all the sound and the form were a late stage in this piece, which was, I think it was a really good experience writing that way, but it was not an easy experience writing that way. It made me uncomfortable a little bit to like write something and not know what the sound would be, even though, obviously I don't have to use it just because I write it. But it made me a little bit uncomfortable. But then I really kind of could just delve into like the actual gestures, and then I could delve into like different properties with the keyboard. And a lot of the thinking like is very basic. Like there's one of the big there's a lot of different interpretations of like dynamics. There's like dynamics on the keys, dynamic on the actual outpost of volume, and then actually the actual signal level too. So there's like all of these kind of play a little bit. And so like I was playing a lot with that idea, and a lot with like, effort on the keys doesn't necessarily always produce sound, which I thought was an interesting concept. So a lot of my concepts that I started with were very, very low tech in that way. And they definitely still played a role in the piece, and then kind of other things kind of got added on as I kind of learned things about the instrument.
I would say,
yeah. What do you want to add to that?
So, I've been very interested in sort of using this instrument to do something interesting, specifically in an experimental musical context, and in all the aesthetics that I associate with experimental music, or as it overlaps with other words, with other genres that we also have named, like new music and avant-garde music. Like how does this instrument fit in that in a lot of ways it really doesn't. What am I trying to say? There's a lot of tension between the way that I experience this instrument and the way that I understand a lot of sensibilities in experimental music. One thing that we talked about in terms of the high tech versus low tech, a lot of performers who are performing with in an avant-garde experimental way. A lot of composers who are and performers who are doing electronic music are getting really heavy into the programming side of it. They're doing often it's command line software, and very sophisticated sound synthesis and sound processing techniques and now there's AI things that I don't even know about, but I know they must exist. And a lot of times people would use a keyboard like this to really do some sophisticated programming. I've myself experimented with connecting the keyboard to max patches, basically just using the MIDI controller function of the keyboard to output MIDI numbers into something like max. And people also will use Logic, usually in a more mainstream like pop music context, but it's the same idea where primarily it's a MIDI controller. Primarily they use the instrument to be a MIDI controller to control other software. And then people will use other kinds of pedals and things to process the signal coming out of the instrument. They'll use pedals. They may use actually software to plug the signal from the instrument going back into the laptop to be processed. There's a lot of very, very high tech ways that people would play an instrument like this in an avant-garde context. And and when I'm not doing that, I really feel like I'm creating a lot of tension with this avant-garde or experimental sensibility, because I'm playing the instrument and I'm taking away these kinds of like high-level experiments that people are doing to really redefine the kind of sound that you hear, and I'm going back to what basically amounts to a traditional approach where there's no programming, no pedals. Like there's a patch cord that plugs into an amplifier in the same way that I did it when I played at a wedding gig. So this idea that what I've been curious about is how is the other sort of thing that I see a lot in avant-garde experimental music, which is extended techniques, and like how does the idea of extended techniques fit into the playing of this instrument? I feel like a lot of times when people are going heavy into the programming, I think that's sort of equivalent to extended techniques in a way, but I also feel like going deep into programming is actually just doing exactly what the software was made to do, and so in some ways that's really not an extended technique at all. So and I will say that this keyboard was created, has built into it some sounds that were reminiscent of like the early days of avant-garde synthesizer playing from the 50s and 60s, and you can just like push a couple buttons and make any of those sounds on this keyboard. So like what used to be this very unusual boundary pushing sound is now just like something that's built into this mainstream market keyboard. So I'm really kind of at a loss for what is an extended technique on this keyboard, and so I can talk a little bit about what it is that I had done over the years to create new unusual approaches. But I actually would, instead of talking about what I did, I would say that really my search for extended techniques was where Megan came in, I think, to this, and in my mind was that I think that her interest in particularly the gestures that she started with was giving me an opportunity to really find some interesting kinds of boundaries between the ways that the keyboard was designed to be played and ways that it was not designed to be played that are still very musically and artistically interesting. And that, I think, was really what drew me to this. One of the things that drew me to this collaboration. I was very excited about, and certainly very satisfied after seeing what's happened. I would probably talk a little bit about some of the gestures and techniques and now sounds. I mean, we have enough of a draft of the piece that it has a sound to it, and I would love to sort of just demonstrate a couple of the things.
Do you want me to show the piece, the score?
No, I think the score. I don't know. Do you want to get the score?
Well,
doesn't make a difference.
Maybe actually before you do the score, I can just offer a little bit of an explanation of some of the things that we've already kind of touched on, just so that you can see it. So one of the things is there is so what the keyboard is designed to do is to generate signal, and actually this particular ModX series was designed as a studio workstation, so it's not really designed for live sound at all. One of the default presets is that when you press the screen here, it beeps, and there's a beep that's there's a speaker that's built into this keyboard just to create the beep, which is totally fine in a studio context because all you're doing is creating signal that goes into your studio mix, and maybe it's helpful for you in the studio to be able to hear when you've touched that screen. The first thing that I did was turn off that beep, so you don't hear a beep when I touch the things on the screen anymore, because I was using it in a live context, and the beep just has no utility in a live context, and it's totally useless. But the point I'm thinking about is it really was designed to be a signal generator. It's designed that I make a sound and you listen to the sound that comes through the sound system, right? So I play a note and you hear and you hear a sound that's generated as signal that's delivered to the amplifier. And one of the things that I think Megan was talking about earlier that we really wanted to play with is the sounds that the instrument does itself make without a speaker. Even though I turned off the beep, there's a lot of other options because there's always key noise when you play the keys. And if you play the keys at a loud dynamic, you can hear a lot of key noise. And the keys aren't the only thing that could make some sound on the keyboard. I can also show you what we did with the volume sliders, that you can hear some sound there, and what we did with the pitch bend wheel. Oh, the active, the active buttons, active keys. So these are keys. So I'll turn the signal on so you can hear these. So the octave key was designed to imitate an instrument that has more than 6 octaves, like a real piano. So if I press press this button, it'll shift the notes up 1 octave, and it'll actually go up higher than that, even beyond the 8 octaves of a piano, and it'll do the same thing on the other end. So if you can hear, like, here's the regular transposition. Here's 1 octave down when I press the octave key, and then here's what it sounds like 2 octaves down, and then I believe go 3 octaves down. So you can hear, and I'm very interested. Even before this piece, I've been very interested in the extreme octaves, the signal that came out of the extreme octaves. But what we were interested in this piece also was this sound that I'm making. Because these buttons are incredibly loud. Again, it makes sense in a studio context, but it's in a live sound context. It ends up creating its own type of sound. So anyway, we have all these things that have a function as far as signal, whether it's shifting the octave or shifting the pitch. Right, this is a pitch bend wheel. But they also just kind of make their own sounds that even if there's no signal, right? Even if I turn it so that there's no signal coming out of the keyboard at all, the master volume is all the way down, you can still hear a lot of different sounds. And so that was something I think one of the sort of conventions that I really wanted to, and I was really excited to work against in the context of this piece. And so that's kind of how I understand what this piece is about and what's exciting about the collaboration. I don't know if we want to.
It goes back to the idea of extended techniques, in the sense that you are searching for new sounds in unconventional ways of playing the instrument, right?
Mm-hmm.
In order to create a composition or a piece of music, etc. Something like that.
I think just like redefining the instrument or finding new contexts for the instrument that it's not typically used or wasn't designed for.
Exactly.
I think that's always the core of my music. I don't think I think I'm very aware of a lot of the history and context of instruments, but like I try to I try to think of them as like pure like physical material, um, and see what else I can make it into, um, and see if there's something interesting beyond like what I know it to do. Because at the end of the day, I feel like composition is just like I like to write something that is different, that I find it interesting, and I don't think anyone else will write, because I think composition is very hard and it takes a long time. And like if somebody there's lots of if there's a music that someone else is gonna write, I kind of am like I'm like I just would rather let them write it, and then I could still listen to the music or play the music or whatever.
Enjoy it.
But then there's yeah, enjoy it. But there's other music
But
that I'm interested in that I don't see people writing. So then I like actually have to write it. I mean,
def-
I do love composition, but it is very hard. It is very, and I like it because
time consuming.
I like because of the collaboration and because of the results. But like I don't necessarily. I mean, who loves to like I put the work in, but like it's hard to put all the work in, and like
I will
if
have to
somebody,
agree with that
yeah,
aesthetical like notion point of view, because if somebody else can do it, then can create it, then it kind of, at least from this aesthetical point of view, I don't want to critique other points of view out there, or anything. It's like, but yeah, if somebody else can think it, can create it, then what's the point? What's really the point? Like we, like idiosyncratic expression is kind of like, at least from my point of view, what's the point of the point of creating art in the end? Like
mm-hmm,
something that only you can create. If somebody else can
mm-hmm,
create it, then why do it? And that's getting into aesthetics and all of that.
mm-hmm,
But what I also wanted to mention was that, um, Andrew mentioned that he listened to these instruments being ultra processed and stuff like that. But I the way I've seen them used, like synthesizers, electric guitars, in the context of new music compositions, is like in very traditional, conventional ways that aren't really exploring those instruments to the fullest in a
Right.
way. Like that would be another aspect of these electronic instruments, that they don't get really explored to the extension that it gets explored to in this piece, for example. um I That's the way I see it. That at least
mm-hmm,
my experience with, when I see a synthesizer within an ensemble, it's like, okay, this is gonna be, this is the synthesizer is gonna sound very, very conventional. It's not gonna try and push any boundaries. It's gonna be more of a filler sound in a way. That's
mm-hmm,
more or
I
less
think for me, one of the there's a reason for that. I mean, not that um not that I like it particularly, but I do feel like I understand why it ends up happening that way. I think, which is that these instruments are already kind of designed to do anything. That like there's already like, in a way, there's like every sound imaginable that is potentially programmed into these instruments. There's that wide variety of sounds of like samples that are just built in. And then when somebody still wants to hear a different sound, and they don't want to do the programming and the pedals, they can download another sound library, or they can probably even create a sound library. So there's really, from a certain perspective, there's really no sound that you can't make. And
mm-hmm,
so if if all you're really interested in is the sound, then you might as well just play the instrument in a conventional way, because you can still get, you know, the kinds of unusual sounds that, like, you know, people might have to spend years sort of exploring with a violin before they can figure out how to make them or something. So, and it's just right there built into the instrument. And I think there's something very exciting about that, and I understand why people just, you know, are okay sort of playing the instrument in a conventional way, because they can make whatever sound that they want on it. But I also think that there is something lost when you are playing in a conventional way, even if the sounds are new and radical and unusual. And I think a lot of that is really about this idea of gesture. And there is so which is why I think starting with gestures was a very appropriate process for this. And then there are, I think, like, principles that that aren't necessarily about the sound that I think come into play, where it's actually, even if, as weird as the sound might be coming from a synthesizer, there's something about just the way that it looks and the experience of watching and listening to it and the experience of performing it, it ends up falling into a very conservative aesthetic in one, you know, from that visual perspective, from that performative perspective, perhaps. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that you mentioned something very interesting, that when you see a synthesizer, when you see, if I see an electric guitar, then you are expecting something, expecting a sound, even though if you add pedals to it, you can add ring modulators, delay, reverbs, etc., an endless array of effects to make basically endless soundscapes, let's say. But in the end, it's like something there's an expectation already when you show up with an instrument. So the
Yeah.
extended techniques, the composition itself, the act of composing with extended techniques, it looks to challenge that. It's always looking to challenge that since its
Yeah.
inception, I will say.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever you wanna mention that the inception of extended techniques was invented, some people may say that even as far as the 19th century with the col legno
Yeah.
gestures with the violin, for
Yeah.
example. Uh,
Yeah.
but that's a topic for, like, the
Mm-hmm.
history of extended techniques. Like, yeah, it's kind of an extensive topic. But
I,
yeah, the thing is the expectation. When you show up with an instrument, there's an expectation of how it's gonna sound. So the composer that has this aesthetical point of view, kind of tries to surprise the audience and himself or herself. Like, for example,
Mm-hmm.
I will guess. How did
so
you think
I mean,
about
I
that?
think that was a challenge. I think that was the challenge for me. Like I that there was for me like strong expectations of what the instrument would do on stage, and it was that it would play all these like it would come and would play in a conventional way, and all these like very radical sounds or whatever would come out of it. And I think that wasn't interesting to me aesthetically, because I always am interested in like the whole performance and like the physicality and like the gestures and the interaction between like human and instrument. And that seemed like hard to bring out at the beginning, because traditionally I don't think it's like noted to be an instrument that like you would
I like that.
like you would
Interaction
notice any
between
kind of
human and
physical
instrument.
attributes.
um,
Yeah,
Between instrument and
I
machine.
really tried to bring out that, and I think the way I did it is I maybe was just a practicality of the situation I was writing in, but I took the instrument was really in the back burner, like when I started writing it, and it was just kind of was really just like the physicality was the first, the physical gestures, and then playing with like some really simple attributes like volume, and then adding more. Yeah, I think because I didn't start with everything it could do. I started with like basically nothing that it could do, like not even the idea of it making sound. That I was able to think of the instrument a little bit like differently, and still somehow get like a lot of it was I was really interested, like I was like playing a lot of these physical gestures and like the way they felt, and the way like I would even engage with the gestures on the keys, was like something that I was interested in. And I was interested. My music for probably even longer than consciously, but for a long time even consciously, I like to explore like physical indeterminacy, where I create situations where typically I explore them as like blocks of repetitive sound, like on the score, but the sound itself, something about the sound is like physically impossible to replicate the same way again and again, so that the sounds very even the sound is very rapidly changing.
Should
Often in
we
kind of a linear progression.
should we put the first page of the score
Sure.
up to sort of to demonstrate this kind of
Sure.
indeterminate sound?
Yeah,
Is that a good example from your perspective, Megan? Of
I think so.
Indeterminate sound.
Yeah, I think that
because it would not sound the same
definitely.
each time. There will be some similarities each time, but in terms of where the volume levels, the signal volume levels are in relation to what my fingers are doing, is just inevitably going to shift each time. And so I while you're pull it up, I can just say like all that's written in the score for the first page is a tremolo between these 5 keys, and that's all that I'm supposed to do. And you can see that there. You can see how it
right.
And then meanwhile my left hand takes the lower staff here, and basically just does a toggle or a tremolo with these sliders which control signal volume. So you just don't know, when I could be playing these keys, or I could be playing that key, and you don't know when the volume is down. I might be on one thing. When the volume is up, I might be my fingers might be playing the other set of keys. Or it could be the other way around. I could be playing these when the volume is down and these when the volume is up, and they're not supposed to be related. They're supposed to be out of phase with each other. And in fact, if you notice in the score, the pace of one tremolo is supposed to slow down gradually as the pace of the other tremolo stays the same. So in the first line, the fingers tremolo is supposed to slow down. And while the volume tremolo is just as fast as possible, which is interesting because there's a lot of physical body limits for me. It's can be tough to sustain the same speed, and also it's actually quite tough to have the tremolo from one hand slowing down while the other one is not slowing down, and that's been a challenge as well. So, and I think one of the things that draws me to this music is that it is really at the limits of not only the capacity of the instrument, but the capacity of the performer. So you'll notice some of that. So I'm going to just try playing this first page so that you can just kind of hear how those tremolos interact with each other, to what extent I'm able to actually perform what was envisioned, and to what extent my limitations are also sort of create some of the experience of the piece. So hopefully this score makes sense, where you can see the different tremolos, and you can see how first the tremolo on the keys slows down, and then on the next line, as tremolo on the keys goes back to the full speed, but it's a tremolo on the volume that slows down. Hopefully you can follow that in the score. So I'm just going to show you what that sounds like and what it looks like. So here.
You also have the resulting sound from the pressing of the keys itself.
Absolutely.
Depends on the venue itself, but most venues will get to listen to it too.
So
yeah.
my understanding is that that's the intention. It certainly is my intention, and I know that we've had conversations about sort of exactly what level we want the speaker to be at. Because and that may actually need to be determined, within the space where it's performed ultimately. But I mean, I think that the vision is that the signal will be rather low compared to what the audience might typically expect. That in order to really draw their attention to the incidental key noise, so this may be a little too loud. This level that I'm at now may be a little too loud for that part of the piece. And we may, I don't know, we'll figure it out. Well, Meg and I are perhaps still discussing it. We may want, a level to where like there's, noticeably more key noise than signal. I think I probably want a little more signal than that.
And I think the overall sound, like, it's a kind of piece that I hope, like, that the listeners kind of like have to almost like lean into and try to like connect. It probably would work better in a smaller space, I would think, than a larger space. Then a piece versus like a piece that like the piece is just like in your face. I don't think it is a piece where the sound is just like pushing at you and you're just experiencing.
I'm not
definitely
sure
a little bit more timid.
Yeah. The thing is that you get this type of what I would call physical counterpoint, where like not really a counterpoint of melodic lines, but a counterpoint of the gestures, of the physical gestures, of the physicality of the music itself. That the physicality of the music itself is the music itself. In the end, you may say that.
Yes.
And I think there's like a purposeful. There's like kind of an awkwardness and clunkiness to the gestures, and purposely so. Like I purposely picked gestures that felt a little bit awkward. Like even the 5 pitches that the dyads I played, the tremolos, the notes are not the easiest notes to tremolo between.
My hand naturally wants to move like this, where our thumb is the opposable digit, so the thumb wants to move independently, the other fingers want to move together. So it would be pretty natural to do something like this, where I have my thumb on one note of the tremolo, and then the chords of the tremolo are all with my other fingers. Does that make sense? So this would be very natural. And that's not what's written. What's written is that these two fingers play together, and these 2 fingers, and then these other 3 fingers are the other part of the tremolo. So I have to play it. What's written is play like this, where these two fingers have to be separated, and my pointer finger, my second finger for pianists or first finger for violinists is coordinated with my thumb, and it's a totally different physical experience, and it's challenging, and in fact, I don't always do it correctly, which I like to think is even that is part of the vision of the piece, I hope.
Yeah, I mean, I like that. I think the awkwardness, it brings out the physicality of the gestures more, because you have to kind of think about it and put it to the forefront. And then I think it's harder for the hand to move that way. And I think because of that if we're trying to play it as fast as possible for a long time, well, the fastest possible is not going to be, even though idealistically we think of it as a even pace tremolo, it's not going to actually be that way, because sometimes we might be able to get those two notes to work a little bit faster, and then sometimes the awkwardness like maybe trips you up for like a quarter of a second or something, something small, but it's
there's a part where I'm supposed to play this as fast as possible, which the to make it sound, that have the kind of rapidity that I want, it's to get that accuracy is a huge challenge, right? So that's another physical challenge and physical sort of gesture that I was very drawn to. And I think there's a certain kind of discomfort in it that I want to embrace around sort of not being sure if I can actually play what was there, and feeling like that's part of the content and vision and experience that the piece is about.
I think that you guys are kind of speaking the same language, and I think that that's because you've known each other for so long, and Andrew kind of got the piece, I don't know, since the beginning, or like he gets your music, he gets what you are going after, that physical aspect, that gestural physical gesture aspect of it all. Like he wants to bring it out, and he knows what to focus on, and I think that's a very good collaborative aspect to it all.
I mean,
like,
a lot of times, if I'm to be honest, like a lot of times if I give performers that I don't have a big relationship with, that they might think that stuff, see that stuff, and they don't get the intentionality of it, and they just think that I don't know what I'm doing, and they don't know how like keyboard instruments work. And I mean, and I think it's the opposite that I've actually, I took piano for many years. I'm not great at it, but I took it. And I do have sit down at the keyboard, and I kind of searched for material that felt and behaved this way to bring out this the kind of physicality in the playing, rather than just find notes that I like the sound and just plop them towards the instrument. That wouldn't be a way that I would ever work. I'm always thinking about how the sound's being produced and how it feels and how it looks to be produced, and how that might relate to the sound. Because I think it's interesting, like if the dynamic too, like if there's a sound that's really easy to produce that makes like a very quiet sound, or if there is a sound that is a little bit more strange to produce and maybe makes if the sound go with the physicality of the gesture, or does it tell a different story? There's like different counterpoint between that as well. That's definitely in the forefront of my brain.
One of the things, speaking of sort of this like key noise or like noise that's produced by the physical instrument and not by any of the digital apparatus or any of the signal or anything. One of the things about it, there are moments of the piece when I am supposed to be playing without any signal coming out. If that makes sense. So like the end of the piece where I'm doing like this, and then at first you can hear some signal. Oh, sorry. Yes, I'm so sorry. Yep. So I'm doing something like this, and at first you can hear some signal, right? Right. We're working on getting the levels to this, right? This will make it a little louder, but something like this. And then at some point, I make it so there's no signal coming out anymore. And I'm doing the same gesture, but the only sound anybody is going to hear is just coming from the actual key clicks and the actual sound of that pitch bend knob. And that's like, so that's one of the examples of sort of like.
So we see a linear process whereas on the first page, like the resultant sound is a mixture between the signal that's coming out of the amplifier and the touching of the keys, the key touch themselves. But at this point, it's like only the physical aspect, the noise, you might say, that comes out of the keys that is supposed to compose to make up the music itself, to make the composition itself. So was that your intention, Megan, to go in that to do that linear process in some aspects, or no?
I don't know if I was necessarily thinking of it linear. I was definitely thinking of it as a dialogue. So like there's definitely like towards the beginning of the piece, you kind of get both of those interplaying with each other. And I think you always get that a little bit. I don't know if the signal ever really completely takes over for more than maybe for a second or two here and there, but I don't think it ever really takes over. But sometimes the physicality does take over and you don't get the signal. But there is like, I think always kind of a dialogue between the two, but it's not always linear. Sometimes it just is directly changing.
There is another thing where like you can hear sound without having any without my fingers being on the keys, and I think that's an interesting visual experience. There's definitely still physical gestures happening, but they aren't necessarily on the keyboard. So I'll be doing something like where I'm using my foot to hold the pedal down. All the sounds are being changed with some of the knobs that are on the keyboard. Oh, I think you got muted, Juan.
Oh yeah, I think you're muted.
About the piece as a whole, like from a performer's point of view.
Well, I think the other thing.
Like, what do you think about it? Like now that you grasp the whole of it. Or the totality.
I mean, there's this sense of it's unfolding a narrative that happens sort of just when you are when the sounds sort of unfold one by one, or they happen one by one, and when you sort of are familiar with the progression of the sound, there's always it's related, I think, to some of my own improvisations that I would do, where I would just sort of I would be in one sound world for a period of time, and then I would find myself organically in another sound world, and it becomes this really kind of journey, but very coherent and very intuitive journey between different sounds. It's hard to describe, and that's kind of one of the ways that I experience this piece as a whole. I think the thing I wanted to make sure that we talked about, that we hadn't talked about yet, that is related to that sort of the sense of the whole that I have. I actually felt like looking at the score and sort of putting up, doing some rehearsals at Megan's house with these pieces of paper on the music stand. I actually felt like the flow that I was describing really got interrupted by trying to do page turns. And I was really preoccupied with how I was going to turn from one page to another, 7 or 8 pages long, maybe, and just how I was going to be able to do it. I know Megan's had different solutions for pages in the past, with like having them be on the floor, which was not my favorite solution. Like you just need to have a separate page turn. That wasn't my favorite solution either, especially because even just like looking at the page was kind of taking away from that sense of flow that I wanted. So in my mind, this piece really needs to be memorized in order to be performed. So I have been doing, I'll send drafts of the recording of the piece that is as rigorously connected to the score as it can be, but with all those details coming from my memory rather than coming from the moment of looking at the score at the time that I'm looking at it. And that's made a huge difference, I think, in how the sense of whole feels for me, but hopefully also in how the listener will experience it as well, in terms of that the sense of whole, where it does not hopefully have a sense of, okay, page, okay, now I have to turn this page so that I can so that in order to be able to see what's on the next page, and instead you can really kind of see these and hear these gestures unfold in the most organic way possible.
Well, and I think like music stands, they literally build like a wall. So they build, they build a wall to divide the musician further from the audience. And they've always posed a problem with my music. That I don't think I've written a piece in a long time that I would rather the music stands not be on stage. And many, many performers have suggested, that whatever piece I'm writing for them really should be memorized. But memorization is not very common in contemporary music practice. It is in classical music, but not in contemporary music.
Not even
and so most of them,
not even concerts.
No. So most people like get that idea, but then I don't know if they don't invest the time, or they just get scared, or but they don't actually memorize it. The only other person that has memorized my works have been dancers. So I wrote a piece with Melanie Aceto that we did last week, and Dan and I wrote a piece for one of her students. And like, if I wrote even with the student, like if I wrote a couple ideas out that I wasn't even committed to yet, and I worked with her on them to see if I even liked them, and she didn't have them memorized the next week perfectly, like 100%, she would feel like terrible. Where I'm like, that's not like where, a lot of times contemporary musicians, like, I would not expect to go to an early rehearsal. I would love for them to go to an early rehearsal and them to know the music, but that's not my expectation usually, because that's not very typical. And it's not typical. They would play without, it's not the music. Usually music, they're very embedded in the music. Even though a lot of them have training in classical repertoire, which is commonly played by memory. It just doesn't translate for whatever reason to contemporary music practice that I've experienced.
No, I cannot think of no.
Well,
Not even for.
I
I
think
cannot
that
think even of big name composers like
Hmm.
for contemporary or 20th century, even avant-garde, post-war music. Like
yeah.
most of the soloists just read from the
Yeah,
scores.
even pieces they've been playing for decades. Sometimes they
Hmm.
still are still playing them at the score, even though you know,
That's what I've
like
seen.
Irvine
I might be wrong,
Arditi,
but
he came to Buffalo almost every year. Fantastic
yes,
performances he always
yes.
gave. Fantastic, like Earth. But I mean, there were some pieces he's been playing for decades and decades regularly, and he would still, have the music on the stage, whether
Hmm.
he was intensely looking at it or it was just a security blanket, or maybe it's because he has so much music he plays that that he doesn't really have memorized. But yeah, there's pieces that he's famous for playing, that he's played since the 70s 80s, and is still performing those pieces. Yeah, not memorized.
Well, I think we've talked about like the sound itself, the different gestures. But I wanted, like, since your relationship is so close and stuff, I wanted to ask Megan, like, how was Andrew's personality incorporated into the
So
composition? Like,
I think the
is it,
biggest
if at,
thing
if at
was
all, like
that,
his mannerisms, his idiosyncrasy
yeah,
as a musician, as a human being,
I'm sure there's a lot of it that has
and
like gone in subconsciously for sure. But the
mhm,
biggest thing that I know consciously is just like that he has a lot of experience with improvisation. And we've done some improvisation together. And I I really love things that are physically indeterminate, but I love the idea of improvisation, but I don't always have ease of putting that in my music. And I do think there are some moments that are just maybe a little bit more open ended than I would have written for another performer, because I kind of had a sense of what he might do with that, and kind of wanted just to see what he would do with maybe less direction than I would typically put in a lot of my pieces, because I tend to put a lot of directions a lot of times in my music. So that's the biggest thing, is I think I did, and I think there was like I think I tend to have a lot of repetitive little thing I'm really interested in. A lot of times I'm not interested in traditional like virtuosic playing, like with lots of notes and lots of rhythms. That's not a huge interest all the time. Um, but I also think that's something that like Andrew can do well. And so there's moments that I feel like I did add that sort of density that is maybe not so intuitive for me as a composer. That was a resultant of that. Um, yeah, and I think a lot of it was like, so Andrew has a big he had a big improvisation project where he improvised every day for over like 1,000 days, and I watched many of those. And so like, and a lot of my experience of watching those improvisations like was very informative to me in writing the piece, and influenced the piece quite a lot. And sometimes there'd be like particular ones that he would have me check out, because he ended up exploring a world that was maybe something similar to what I was interested in. So yeah, that was something that was very informative, was just like kind of the fact that I knew it, the types of things he typically did. and I kind of allowed for some moments to come through. I think I pushed him as a performer too at times, I think, but then sometimes allow what I knew he was already producing to come through. And I think, yeah, a lot of the work he was making just was very inspirational of a lot of the materials.
Yeah, I've listened to a lot of those. Like, I put the link in the banner to anybody that's interested. Are they all there? All of your micro improvisations
That it's
in the YouTube channel?
there's yes. There are basically 1,100 of them there, and
Those are plenty.
And so yeah, and they're all under the playlist that I created, and I tried creating a playlist and a hashtag for it. I'm not sure that the internet has evolved in ways that made either of those two things particularly useful at this moment in time. But if you can find the playlist and or the hashtag, then that might help you find it. So hashtag 1000 improvisations, and which is also the name of the playlist. There's a playlist that I created to group all of the improvisations, and it's called hashtag 1000 improvisations, all one word. So I believe it's relatively searchable, and even if you don't see the whole playlist immediately, you should be able to see, a good number of the 1,000 that are out there. And I think the ones that come up first are probably the best ones, at least according to the internet audience or the YouTube algorithm. But so that's absolutely available.
And some of these improvisations are half an hour long. Well, a lot of them.
I was giving myself, most days I was giving myself a 20-minute minimum. And then you'll see me stop at, 21 minutes or 20 minutes and 10 seconds or something, many days. And then at times, especially in the beginning and at other phases or other particular days later in the project, I would 20 minutes I far exceeded the 20-minute minimum. Usually when I did a live performance and I made a special event, it was usually about the equivalent of 2 20-minute performances. So it was usually usually 40 to 45 minutes was kind of the length of a live improvisation that I would do. So they're generally in the 20 to 40-minute range. There's a few moments when I push the boundaries in both directions. There was one improvisation number 268, I believe, was 268 minutes long, but it was 268 minutes silence. And then there's a few that you can find that are like just a minute or two or less. I believe the shortest one is either it was intended to be less than 60 seconds, although I think it may have ended up being a little longer than 60 seconds. But anyway, so
when most people kind of hear the word improvisation, they think of jazz or classically trained musicians may think of the Baroque period.
Yeah.
How would you describe your improvisations?
I mean, I certainly come from a jazz background. Like, it certainly is something that organically came to me out of jazz. Okay. That's the short, simple answer. But I mean, it's also, it's a very pervasive composition technique in this improvisation project, to where it goes a little bit beyond, or far beyond, I think, this idea of sort of like just creating a new melody in a prescribed rhythmic and harmonic structure. Like and I mean, jazz players also frequently do more than just create a melody over the changes, right? I mean, you'll see rubato, introductions that are like entirely free or something. Keith Jarrett, I think, was known for doing entire concerts where he would, and it wasn't just him. I think he was somebody who had a particular reputation for doing entire concerts that were entirely improvised, to where the melodies were improvised. What the form of the melodies, the form of the phrase structure was improvised. Which. And then the long scale, the large scale piece was improvised in terms of which thing would come when, and which melodies would you play when, and in what order, and which textures would come when, and what was the energy level of each, and that was all improvised from beginning to end. It was still in a jazz context. And so that's kind of what my starting point was, and then I will just frequently push the boundaries aesthetically far beyond what Keith Jarrett was doing, and more in the ways that what we often call free jazz, more like the ways that free jazz players might improvise. So that I end up going in that direction a lot. Although I think I've gotten some pushback from free jazz musicians that often my music is is a little bit too traditional. My improvisations are a little bit too traditional. I think my approach tends to be either sort of all of the above, like any sound is appropriate. It doesn't have to fit into an avant-garde paradigm any more than it has to fit into a jazz aesthetic, and instead it can be all of the above. And then a lot of times I'm trying to really deconstruct the conventions, and so I will put very recognizably traditional material into an improvisation as a way of deconstructing how we understand that traditional material. So that's sort of my approach to improvisation. And there's also this sort of there is within the European avant-garde world, there are also improvisers who are doing, again, mostly staying in this avant-garde aesthetic, where they don't tend to be going back into anything traditional, but there is this world of sort of European free improvisation as well. And these days there's a lot of overlap between the two. And when I did my first master's at Mills College, I was getting all some of the students, their degree was in improvised music, and I was trying to do a lot of the same things that they were doing, where it was this very free improvisation that was a mix of free jazz and European avant-garde and probably a few other things mixed in.
Would you like me to show a snippet of one from YouTube?
If you got something queued up, we can probably do a quick
snippet,
and people will get a little bit of idea.
The first one that appears is in the Hollow of the Rainbow.
Well, so that would not be in the improvisation series. If it was in the improvisation series, it would be called Improvisation Number Something.
Okay.
By Andrew Barnes Jamieson.
Okay, give me a second. Then it will be on the playlist itself.
Yeah, 1,000 improvisations.
Number one.
We'll do number one. Number one was performed before I really had an idea of what this whole project was going to be. I believe my.
Then.
But I mean,
55.
All right, 55 it is.
55 it is. Give me a second. It's a bit of it is 19
55,
minutes.
I think. At 55, you're maybe thinking, oh, maybe I could get to 100.
55 was possibly the first one that I gave a number to. Was one that I retroactively added numbers to the earlier improvisations. I think 55 was the first one that was published with a number, or that was streamed with a number in the heading, or somewhere around something in the 50s.
I think we've got it here. Let's see how it develops. Let me push a bit forward.
Um, Seems to have been a relatively chill day for me.
Yeah. Well,
and which
that's
was
one of
part of
the
the freedom of the improvisation. It was, and
It is, but still, like I think in the
anything can
earlier
happen on
days
any
when
day. But
you were, I think in the early days people were reacting with you in live time.
yeah, I always encourage live engagement, and it didn't. And at this phase in the project, I frequently was getting live engagement, and so it's possible, and I don't remember because it's hard to remember 1,000 of these distinctly, but it's possible that somebody said something in a live comment. The live comments aren't recorded because it was streamed initially on Facebook, and then copied over to YouTube later. But it's possible there was a live comment that changed the direction of the piece. Usually it was like somebody giving me the title of a song that they wanted to hear me play. But I would very willingly work that in if I had seen the comment. So it's conceivable that this piece ended with something like that.
But then a sudden change.
Yeah, I have a feeling I was more like it wasn't something it wasn't going to change the rest of the piece. I have a feeling I was in a pretty I wouldn't maybe a few more changes.
Well, when I've listened to the many of your to some of your improvisations, I feel like it's kind of, yeah, it may be based on jazz, but it's very different from what I kind
Right.
of
Right.
hear.
No, absolutely. I mean, I'm really interested in pushing beyond the aesthetic boundaries beyond what jazz typically is, and which is something that free jazz and avant-garde improvisers do. Except I also push the free jazz and avant-garde sensibilities to the point of working traditional music back into my material, which I think sort of puts me a little bit outside of any tradition in a way.
And that's what we try to do as composers, as artists and musicians, pretty much.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like that's pretty much what we've been talking about all of this time.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, yeah, the unexpected. There's an expectation
Yes.
of what. There's even an expectation when we listen to the word improvisation, like
Yes.
jazz, for example, and
Yes.
some subgenres in jazz. But then again, it's like, how do we turn that upside down in a way? And not just for the sake of turning it upside down, but just of that search of finding something new modes of expression that haven't been used before. Because if they've been used or overused before, it's like, okay, like I get it, but it wouldn't be my own language. We're always kind of searching for our own language in a way. And this
and
has
maybe
our
that's
compositions. Yeah.
I say, maybe that's how Andrew and I like get along so well, because I think our music and our practice, I think on a surface level are very, very different from each other. But I think that we think in that manner, and I think maybe we're both kind of outsiders within like our craft a little bit.
And this is not to disrespect the traditions. We come from a tradition and we studied it seriously, like, and we pay our respects and all of that. But it's also to try and push it a bit, try and contribute to it
Mhm.
in whatever way we may think we can, right? It's about
Mhm.
many things. And I think that your collaboration in many ways kind of expresses that, explicitly
Mhm.
expresses that. And I will say that pretty much that's what I have to say about all of this. Do you guys want to add anything else to this
No,
conversation?
I mean,
Really cool.
I think that kind of pursuit just really is something that I find really exciting in music. Because
Yeah.
I think like if there's anything like to taking chances is always exciting, but in music, in my opinion, there's not a lot of downfall. Like the worst that will happen when you take a big chance in your music is you write something that is bad or doesn't work, and people will live, people will go on. But you could also write something different that like can change the way we think about music, maybe open us up to new sounds, new ideas, and I think that can be very exciting and powerful. So that's the thing I like most is that to me it's like risk taking in music is, in my opinion, like all reward, and there's not huge stakes really at stake. Um, and it was really fun to work with somebody who also is kind of looking for finding new things, not just new sounds, but like new um, ways of thinking about sound and about music, and um, yeah, that was just really exciting to work and interact with, and I think our interaction got me to different places for sure than I would have ever
Mm.
just gone on my own. Um, because a lot of times, Andrew would discover something that or be thinking about one part of the song that I wasn't thinking about, and then I'm like, oh well, maybe I should think about it, and then maybe that would come into another part of the piece. So yeah, it's just this like I think there was like a playfulness, especially in this piece about just trying to find and discover, which I thought was really fun.
That's all I got. Do you have anything to
All
add,
right.
Andrew?
No, no, I've had a wonderful time in that process of discovery and creation. And yeah, grateful for the the openness and the experimentation and the unfolding and this discovery process. And I really think there's a lot of payoff to the risks that we took, or to the uniqueness and radicalness of what this piece represents for me and what it's offered to me artistically. So I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for the collaboration, the opportunity. I'm grateful for the eventuality of the premiere. I think maybe 2025.
Yeah.
My desire is that Megan will be present in the same place that I am in performing the piece. So we have to figure out when that can happen. But
Yeah.
I believe that musically, artistically, we're kind of ready. I'm very excited, very grateful for that. Thank you to both of you for having me back again.
Yeah. Thanks for coming.
Appreciate what you're doing, the conversations that you're creating and sharing, what you're offering to musicians and those of us who are invested in the process of creation of music. So I just want to say that, and yeah, I've had a great
Yeah.
time.
Thanks, and thank you. And what you mentioned about like exploring the sounds and expanding, I think that in the end that's what this is about. That's what why we do what we do.
Mhm.
But yeah, well, it's been nice. It's been really great. I really like this conversation and getting to know your minds. But this has come to an end. So be safe,
All
people.
right. Well,
Bye.
well, thank you. Have
Bye.
have a great evening.